He gave them peace, they gave him chains. Toussaint Louverture, the man who rebuilt a burning colony, who outmaneuvered empires, was gone. Not slain in battle, not overthrown in revolt, but betrayed by a letter. They said they came in peace, but what sailed across the Atlantic wasn't diplomacy, it was an army. 40,000 battle-hardened men, veterans of Europe's bloodiest wars, led by General Charles Leclerc, Napoleon's own brother-in-law. Polished boots, tricolour flags, empty promises. Toussaint laid down his arms, and they took him in the night. Shipped across the sea like cargo, locked away in a frozen cell in the French Alps, Fort de Joux. No sunlight, no visitors, no nameplate on the door. There, in silence, the general died, alone, starved, erased. Paris cheered. Napoleon believed the colony had been brought to heel. But they hadn't ended the revolution, they had made a monumental miscalculation. Because when Toussaint, the only man of reason, fell, something else rose. In the mountains, blades were being sharpened. In the cane fields, drums began to beat. In the rebel camps, silence turned to fire. Sacrifices and offerings were being made to the spirits of war, the gods of vengeance, the Iowa of revolution. And at the center of it all stood a man who had no desire for peace, no interest in diplomacy, only fire. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint's fiercest general, now his shadow, his successor, his fury, now his retribution. France thought they'd killed the revolution, but all they did was set it free. At first, it looked like the peace might hold. General Charles Leclerc made all the right promises. He came speaking of peace, of prosperity, of freedom. He swore that slavery would never return. He called Toussaint a hero of the Republic. And Toussaint Louverture, the man who had once been enslaved, who had risen to defeat Spain, Britain, and rebuild a colony torn by fire, chose to believe. Not out of naivety, but out of discipline. Out of hope that war could end with something better. So he laid down his arms, and they took him in the night. He was invited to a meeting alone. He arrived unarmed. He was seized, shackled, put on a ship, and vanished into the fog of the Atlantic. In Paris, they celebrated. The black general was gone. The colony would fall in line. But they had made a mistake, not just a betrayal, a miscalculation, because Toussaint was the restraint. He fought for peace. The man who rose in his place fought for vengeance. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint's fiercest general, once a slave, once a soldier, now the reckoning. Where Toussaint wrote constitutions, Dessalines sharpened blades. Where Toussaint enforced discipline, Dessalines unleashed fury. He didn't speak in metaphors, he didn't write to Paris. He sent word to generals across the island. Nous ne nous battons pas pour la France, nous ne nous battons pas pour des traites, nous nous battons pour qu'aucun enfant ne n'est jamais enchaîné. We are not fighting for France, we are not fighting for treaties, we are fighting so no child is ever born in chains again. And the war began again, this time without mercy. Rebels re-emerged from the forests and mountains. The fields went silent, the fires came back. Supply lines were cut, ambushes set, French patrols vanished into the jungle and didn't return. Even the land turned against the invaders. Yellow fever swept through French camps, a silent, rotting curse that took more soldiers than any blade. The colony wasn't dying, it was transforming. From revolution into holy war. France thought it could crush a rebellion, but what it had awakened was a man with no intention of surviving peacefully. The illusion of peace had been buried with Toussaint. Now there was only fire. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, no longer just a general, now the embodiment of vengeance. declared war without boundaries, not just against France, against the very memory of chains. His orders were clear: no more negotiation, no more mercy, burn everything they touch. And the island obeyed. The French had come expecting to restore order. What they found was something else. A war that had studied their tactics and mutated into something they could not control. In the north, they marched confidently into a narrow gorge known as Ravine à Couleuvre, a French column nearly 2,000 strong, led by seasoned officers armed to the teeth. But the ridgelines were watching. Muskets opened up from the high ground, blades sliced through the underbrush. It was over in hours. General Dessalines was dead, his troops scattered, ambushed, outmaneuvered, destroyed. Over 1,200 French soldiers were killed or captured. It wasn't a battle, it was a reckoning. On the coast, the town of Léoguen fell under siege, not by any formal army, but by shadows. Dessalines' fighters severed the supply lines, poisoned the wells, and snatched scouts in the night. One morning, the French commander awoke to find his men's bodies nailed to the gates, mouths stuffed with sugarcane. Their economy, their empire, now their curse. But the deadliest ally of all was the land itself. Yellow fever swept the lowlands like a silent reaper. French soldiers collapsed in droves, vomiting black bile, writhing in fevered delusion. By year's end, 15,000 men were dead, not by gunfire, but by the jungle's breath. And among the corpses, Leclerc, Napoleon's brother-in-law, the commander of 40,000, now a memory. Paris didn't send another diplomat. They sent a butcher, General Donatien Rochambeau. He came not to win hearts, he came to end them. In Cap Français, his troops tied hundreds of prisoners, men, women, children, to planks, to cannonballs, to one another, then cast them into the sea. Drownings by the dozen. The ocean choked on their bodies. Locals called it baptism by death. In Port-de-Paix, Rochambeau unleashed Cuban bloodhounds, massive beasts trained to disembowel human prey. They were loosed on rebel villages. They didn't bark, they hunted in silence. One survivor recalled finding a child's sandal inside a dog's cage. This was no longer a war, it was annihilation. And Dessalines answered in kind. For every atrocity, he delivered tenfold. He razed outposts, he poisoned food stores, he gave no quarter. The French were bleeding. Troops, commanders, sanity, even former doubters, Henri Christophe, Alexandre Pétion, returned to Dessalines' banner because now the war wasn't about politics, it was about vengeance, about memory. And across the sea, Napoleon, busy carving up Europe, stopped answering the colony's cries. There were no more reinforcements, no more gold, only silence. The empire that had come to restore Saint-Domingue was now trying to escape it. The French had been broken. Once they marched with polished boots and drums, silent in pride. Now they limped, starving, surrounded, begging for mercy that would never come. By late 1803, the Black Armies held the mountains, the valleys, the coast. The island was theirs. But the revolution wasn't done. There was still one battle left, one final reckoning. November 18th, the Battle of Vertier. The last stronghold of French resistance, the last desperate gamble of a dying empire. General Jean-Jacques Dessalines sent his troops forward with no promise of survival, only of glory. General Francois Capois, called Capois le Mort, led the charge. Under a storm of French cannon fire, Capois was thrown from his horse. He rose, dusted off the smoke, and marched forward again, musket high, shouting, "En avant, en avant!" La mort n'est rien. Forward, forward, death is nothing. Even the French ceased fire, momentarily stunned by his defiance. They saluted him, then opened fire again, but the line never broke. Not this time, not again. By sundown, the tricolor flag fell. The French surrendered. After 13 years of war, betrayal, fire, and death, the revolution had won. The French boarded their ships, quiet, defeated, haunted. Rochambeau was forced to sign the terms of surrender to a black general, an act unthinkable in Europe. But this wasn't Europe. This was Haiti. January 1st, 1804, Dessalines stood before his people and declared, "We are free." No more Saint-Domingue. The colony's name was burned with its chains. From the ashes, they resurrected its first name, its true name. Haiti, land of mountains, spoken by the Taino people long before Columbus ever brought the sword. Haiti, the first free black republic in the world, born not in parliaments, but in the smoke of plantations, the blood of rebels, the silence of the forgotten. It was the greatest defeat the French Empire had ever suffered, and Napoleon never recovered. Months later, he would sell off a vast swathe of French territory to America, the Louisiana Purchase, funded by the failure of Saint-Domingue. But the victory came at a price. In the months that followed, Dessalines made his final decision: let no trace of them remain. He ordered the massacre of nearly every remaining French colonist on the island. Men, women, children. He made no distinction. To him, they were the shadow of slavery, a reminder that chains could always return. To the outside world, it was unthinkable. To Dessalines, it was insurance. And when it was done, there was no going back. The revolution had triumphed, but freedom came with ghosts. The Haitian Revolution reshaped history. It shattered the chains of one of the richest colonies on earth and raised the first free black republic from its ashes. But stories like this don't fade by chance. They're buried, erased, rewritten. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe to keep it alive. And in the comments, tell us, what part of this story hit you the hardest? What will you remember? Your voice keeps the fire burning. Your memory keeps the revolution alive.